Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast for founders, entrepreneurs, dreamers, and leaders navigating the journey of growth. In each episode, we get into the setbacks, the rebuilds, the pivots, and the lessons learned along the way. These are honest conversations with leaders who face challenges head on and found success in business and in life. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Scott Abbott. He's the founder and CEO of Strategos and Boss Up and works as a business and executive coach, investor, board member, and author. Over the past 30 years, he has launched, operated, bought, and sold businesses, raised over $35 million in venture capital, and led organizations that generated billions in sales. This matters for founders because growth alone does not build strong companies. Structure, leadership discipline, and clear operating systems determine whether the company scales or stalls. Hi, Scott. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good, Sonia. Thanks for having me on the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to get into this conversation with you. So let's get started. When you look back at your early career, what first thought you that growth without operating discipline becomes a problem?
Well, candidly, I didn't know that at the start of my career that I wish I did. It's part of my purpose, cause, passion, and motivation for doing some of the work I do today, that hopefully the mistakes I made and the dumb things I did, I can share to others so they avoid some of those mistakes. But what I wish I knew back in the day was, yes, in addition to the energy that entrepreneurs and founders have, the passion, the desire, the things they want to achieve, it helps to have what we call systems, the appropriate recognition that we need to not only, have our dreams and our goals, but we need to, embrace process and have structure with regard to how we do what we do. And, some of these boring things like, keep score and report and manage, not just lead. So, looking back, I made a bunch of mistakes, but, we also learn from our mistakes, right? Stumbling blocks can be building blocks, as they say. So looking back, I raised a lot of money, even bought a bunch of companies, and I really didn't know some of the, let's just call it the essential concepts, tools, and disciplines about how to build and run a company. And so I wish I knew then what I know now, but, you can't change the past. So that'd be my summary.
Yeah. For sure. So you raised over 35 million and led companies generating billions in sales. What is a one operating discipline founders ignore early that later become painful to fix?
Yeah, again, I said earlier, we like to summarize and keep things simple. So we talk about the essential concepts, tools, and disciplines. We have a framework in our Boss Up solution around 9 core competencies. But one of the concepts I think, if taken out of context, is challenging to a lot of people, and that's structure first, people second. And what that really says is, hey, I've got friends, I've got family, I have people that I believe are cool and I want to hang with, but it doesn't mean they should be necessarily your key employees, especially early on when you don't have much money and you're minding your pennies and your P's and Q's. And what the concept of structure first, people set, it's actually very humane, because it says, instead of putting you in harm's way and bringing you on board, that, yeah, you might get a little paycheck and some money, but if things aren't organized properly and you get frustrated, if you don't know what you're doing, you get anxious, if you start to just, have difficult times, you deal with conflict and frustration. So I really think, there's this counterintuitive realization that systems sound like it's bureaucracy and rules and rigor, and you're like, I want to be free and do what I want to do. So I would say that is a big realization, is to make sure that, as the founder, the owner, the entrepreneur, that not only do you, again, have your passion and your purpose and what it is that you think you want to do in a product or service, but be careful when you bring people on, that you're ready, that they're the right people, that you've assessed, and you're doing the best you can so that ideally, while they're coming on board to help you, you also aren't putting them in a position that can cause harm for you and for them.
Yeah, for sure. You've built companies and coached leaders. What patterns separates founders who scale successfully from those who stall?
Ah, well, you played right into my hands. He says with a devious, despicable me kind of laugh. Yeah, I think again, counterintuitively, people hear the word systems and operations and structure, and they just feel that that's like inhibiting, and that's not what entrepreneurs do. And I would say actually, it's quite the opposite. If you want to be successful, ideally, you have a better plan. You have more confidence in terms of what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to get it done, who does what. And so, might sound a little bit like, being a good Girl Scout or a good Boy Scout, but it's true. And so I would just suggest that I see a lot of people rush and be quick. Problem is when you do
Hmm.
that, things go bump in the night, you stub your toe, you make mistakes, and certainly, hopefully failure is not fatal and success isn't permanent. So even though you do stub a toe or bruise your ego or something, you dust yourself off and keep going. But ideally, right, Sonia, you'd rather avoid a few of the mistakes and the failures. You'd rather have a smoother ride. And so again, that's where good systems and awareness comes in. And I would just say that's the biggest thing. They stumble when they don't have to, and they can 10x easier than they think they can by again embracing a better formula to build, run, and scale.
Let's just say I'm a first-time founder and I've never done this before. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I had this great idea, worked out. I started a company. What's your advice for me as a first-time founder who's just starting out? What is like the number one, or give me three things that I should do right away that are going to set me up for success?
You mean besides going out and getting yourself a copy?
Yes,
And by the way,
besides that.
not a boring book. It's exciting. It's like a picture book. It's
Yeah.
by numbers way if I wish I would have known. No, but seriously, I think because of AI and the internet, uh, get over yourself, right? If you've got the energy, the head, the heart, the desire, the product, the service, great. Complement that by saying, hey, there's been people before me who have learned, who have built. So there's frameworks, there's templates, there's guidance that's already preordained, if you will, that you can just simply leverage and bring into your world free of charge. And then there's this little thing, people might have been hearing about called AI. So
Hmm.
again, make AI your ally. Don't make it your leader. Don't make it your you know your new version of you. It's a complement.
Hmm.
It's an additional tool, asset, resource to administer better and get more insight and depth and confidence and understanding. So uh, honestly, there's really no excuse except for, you ready? Your ego. Your ego is what gets in the way, and I call it the
Mm.
ego IQ ratio. So, your EQ has got to match with your IQ, which means you've got the wherewithal to rise above what you believe and complement it with additional materials and frameworks and insights so that ideally, 1 + 1 = 10. Take what you want
Yeah.
to do, what you're ready to do, what you should do, harness and leverage proven insights and frameworks and assets from other people. Uh,
Yeah.
there really is honestly no excuse except for, you can't read the label from inside the box. So people, struggle with getting out of their own way. And second, just making peace that the most efficient, effective way to get from here to there is with somebody helping you. And so much can be done today thanks to technology and AI that could never have been,
Yeah.
even years ago, let alone a decade
Yeah.
or so ago.
So number one, frameworks. Number two, AI. And number three, let go of your ego. Did I get that right?
Uh-huh, and then, you can go out to Amazon and get this little book called Boss Up. That's
Right.
right, and that's it. But even back to the little joke about the book, a pen and paper, there's a lot of fun
Mm.
things you can do with the pen and paper in terms of, we call it the Ben Franklin. It's a checklist of goods and bads and pros and cons and progress and momentum.
Right.
One of the concepts is working on, not working in. And what happens
Yeah.
is people just start going and they're just grinding and their heads down and I get it, they're rocking and roll, but next thing you know, they bump into a wall. Next thing you know, they don't see the storm metaphorically coming over the horizon. They don't recharge, they don't recoup. They, 4 or 5 weeks in, they go, hey, I've been working 18-hour days, 6 days a week, right? That's not healthy. So
Yeah.
again, this harmony, everybody talks about work-life balance. That's rubbish. Think about
Yeah.
it.
I'm with you on that for
Yeah,
sure.
right. But you can have harmony, and harmony means some days, you're up, you're down. Just it's like, a good meal. You don't necessarily love everything about it, but it came together. So I prefer the term harmony over balance, realizing that like most things in life, there's always a bit of give and take. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I just think it's best. Isidore Sharp, the founder of Four Seasons, has a great quote: "Systemize the predictable to humanize the exceptional." And Jim Collins, one of the most famous authors, Good, Great, Built to Last, he writes, "Magic happens when the spirit of entrepreneurship meets a culture of discipline." So common between all of those is again, passion and process, purpose
Hmm.
and profit. It goes together like, milk and cookies. So that would
Yeah.
be again one of those counterintuitive things to a lot of people that it's just this let's go, entrepreneurial vigor. I get it. But when you complement that with a more intelligent, systemized way to identify, develop, produce, deliver, lead, manage, validate, things just are that much easier and typically that much more successful.
Got it. So when you look back at one of your failures, what was the real root cause and how did you fix it or what did you learn from it?
One of my first books, Level Up, um, I raised around 15 million bucks during the dot-com era, bought a bunch of companies. Before I raised the money, I actually I made good money. I had one of the first web development, web systems engineering companies in the world. Um, this was the mid '90s, and I raised a lot of money, and we bought a bunch of companies. And as I said earlier, as I look back, very honestly, I didn't even really know the difference between a P&L and a BLT. I mean, I knew what I knew, but I just was not aware, and I had a lot of bravado. Some would say, a little bit more ego than I should have. The dot-com era was a little kooky. In hindsight, we
Hmm.
all did a bunch of dumb things. The famed investor Warren Buffett, called that era, said, even turkeys can fly in tornadoes. So we did some things, right? But yeah, I look back and I say, I didn't appreciate concepts like time span capacity. I didn't appreciate first things first. I just thought it was about how fast, how big, how visible, and a lot of those things, they don't matter, right? Even if you're a startup today, I would say that, and if you look at the venture capital markets today as well, but they're looking for good old fashioned underpinnings, cash flow, respect to the balance sheet, stewardship on the investment and how you're using it. Yeah, there's a couple
Hmm.
of the kooky, AI companies that are doing things again like the old days, growing so fast it makes your head spin. But for most people, they're not going to take that route. They're going to go friends and family. They're going to take out loans. They're going to use their own money. And I would just say the importance of good financial stewardship,
Hmm.
and you don't need to be an operational expert. You just need to be, good enough to know what you don't know and willing to learn what you need to know. So that would be my biggest mistake. In fact, it was so bad I got fired from my own company by my board. They're like, "Yeah,
Oh no.
time for you to leave, man. We need some adults in this room, so move on."
And it's so funny you say that because my background when I first started my career, I was like a bookkeeper. So I understand like, a little bit more than just the basics. And I have conversations with founders and I'm like, well, what's your profit and loss like? And and like they have no clue. And I'm like, wait, you raised how much money? And you don't run a a profit and loss every month. You don't know what your burn rate is and like just typical things. And I think a lot of founders like get into trouble because of that. So that's a really good example. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I think one of the ones I wish I knew too, to your point, even when you don't raise money, you talk about burn and P&Ls and balance sheets and cash flow. Uh, hey, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen out there, right? There's a book by Mike Malkowitz called Profit First. Great
Yeah.
book. I would recommend that. Second, right there, the importance of leading versus lagging indicators, because most small companies think the health of their business is their checking account or what they see in the bank. And the reality is what they see is already done. They can't change that. So the
Hmm.
importance of stewardship on what we call the leading indicators, the actions and the activities. My newest talk, Moments Momentum, is emphasizing on the fact that you don't result in results and you don't fall into failure, right? You got to
Yeah.
stay mindful of the here and the now. And so that's another big thing to your point. I see a lot of entrepreneurs who either get enamored by the plan, the goals, the culture, and the results and the production, and their life is in between both of those.
So many founders pride themselves in being scrappy. When does scrappiness start hurting performance instead of helping it? And I'm asking this question for a reason.
Yeah. Well, what happens when you take the S off of scrappy? What's that spell?
Okay, crappy.
And let's
That's a
be
good
honest,
point.
I see a lot of crappy companies out there because, again, broken record Scott here. And it's not just because it's a crappy run company. That's again a lagging or byproduct. What they're missing
Mm,
is, and they can't tell me this is not true, is their life ends up being crappy too. The company ends up running them versus them running the company.
yeah.
That. And again, I get the romantic. We've seen the movies, we've read the books. I've lived the life of literally sleeping in a sleeping bag and, living in the office morning, noon, and night for months on end, if not longer. But, you don't have to go that route. And I would say as much as that's romanticized, it's not healthy, it's not accountable, it's not stewardship. So yeah, I would say, scrappy, and I get it, especially in tech, agile, MVP, Scrum. Yeah, okay, that might be a good concept for the way we build stuff, but it's not necessarily the concept for how we run, operate, and scale stuff. And there's a difference. And
Yeah.
so ideally, what you're doing is you're building a company that is respectful, just like the humans building it. We have to sleep. We have to recharge. We have to rejoice. We also have to stop and fix and check.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would just say, scrappy is a concept that I think people idealize, and I would say it's not a badge of honor. It's a badge
Hmm.
of trouble, in my opinion. If you're going about being scrappy, and scrappy is as scrappy does, then that says, how you do typically most everything is how you do anything. And so that just means you're cutting corners, you're putting elbow grease over intellect. And again, it's a balance. I like scrappy. It's just like motivation. I like motivation too, but motivation fades. It's inconsistent.
Yeah.
It goes up and down, right? So what we're trying to do is have a more consistent rhythm and beat, back to the word harmony. So yeah,
Yeah.
scrappy's cool, but uh, you know,
Well, I also think that like if you're living in hustle culture or if you're being scrappy, at some point you are going to burn out.
well, at some point you go back and, I've said this quite a few times, and I'm probably getting less invited to the startup events because I've done a lot as an entrepreneur in startups. I'm a venture capitalist. I've invested in over 14 startup companies, but I go
Hmm.
to these events, and some of I've been going to 4, 5, 7 years as a speaker, as an attendee, and I see the same people still running companies. I just have a very simple question. How long are you to continue to be scrappy and be a startup? I mean,
Yeah.
you're not a teen forever. You're not a toddler forever. I mean, when do you decide to say, hey, then here's my point. Then don't be a startup, right? Just be a
Yeah.
good business. And that's good too, right? There's a difference between being a good business and building a great company. A big difference. But there's nothing wrong with having a nice solopreneurship or a
Yeah.
scrappy business. And that is different than building a company that you intend maybe to sell or have a succession plan to give it to somebody else in your family, right? Because in those situations, they don't want you to be over dependent on an individual.
Yeah. So let's talk about what you just said for a little bit more, because I see this a lot and I never quite understand it. And you're a VC, so I want to understand like your point of view. So, I've built two companies, two tech startups, but they were a startup for a certain period of time, and then like the pressure was on to make them successful companies. So, after 2, 3 years we started making revenue right away, but after 2, 3 years, the pressure was on to like, okay, we got to meet these quotas. We have to make sure that there's cash flow. You got to make sure that you're covering all of your expenses, et cetera, et cetera. And getting to that stage where we can raise funds, but we don't need to because we're like generating our own, we're a company. So why are some startups, why are they startups for like 10, 15 years? And why isn't the incentive to like be in the startup phase for like 2, 3, maybe 5 years, but then, be a full company that's generating revenue and paying its own bills and has cash flow? Like, why is there, why is that happening?
Like, so let's just say, back to your, you understand economics in terms of that terminology. So you're not a fiduciary just because you're a fiduciary. If you bring on other people's money, again, I would argue friends and family, a bank loan, but
Hmm.
venture capital in particular, because they have very stringent covenants and expectations and plans. And, the model itself is fairly easy to understand, right? Let's just say they put 5 million in at X valuation. When they exit, they want, 25 times that five, right? And
Yeah.
there's covenants and there's, legal tender that you sign. I mean, some of the term sheets I've done are 2 inches thick, but really there's a code of conduct and ethics. So again, I would say if you have outside people's money, you have a fiduciary responsibility. And we believe there are 5 stages of companies. Your first stage is scrappy. Yeah, let's be honest. Back to that word. You're
Yeah.
with crazy things at crazy times, and it's consuming your life. Welcome to being a founder. Second stage is really about people, not necessarily hiring a bunch of people, but who's around you, your stakeholders, your individuals that are helping you get from here to there. Third stage, and this is the stage that, to your point, it either makes or breaks it, is system stage. Now it's time to get organized, systemize your processes so that we can liberate and free people up to focus on other things, right? If everything's
Hmm.
a priority, nothing's a priority. And there's just a lack of operating rigor and rhythm for most companies in stage three, and that's where they either make it or break it. We've heard of the concept called 10x. Well, 10x is not a binary equation, it's a concept. And again, that requires having the right resources, ideally a good product or service that people want to buy. You can't
Yeah.
compare 8 out of 10 companies, honestly, that think that they can get compared to there. They just don't have the product or the service. Now, that said, about 65, almost 70% of the GDP in the world comes from companies that other companies have a similar or the same product. They just have to do
Yeah.
it better, right? And one of the big concepts, especially with AI and systems today, is lean and clean. So be
Yeah.
lean, don't spend a lot of money and do dumb things, and be clean. Be very careful about how you do what you do. And so, it's about efficiency and effectiveness, but it's also, again, back to culture and passion. So yeah, I just think that people don't realize the mechanics and the engineering that has already been proven. "Oh, I'm different." Yeah, well, P&L is a P&L. Cash flow is cash.
Yeah.
Balance sheet's balance sheet. You would be gap's gap. So get over yourself, humble thyself, and I'd say that's it right there. They just and again, if you just want to stay a stage two company, stay a stage two company. I mean, I'm all for companies generating solopreneurships, if you will, 250,000, 100,000, right? You clear 50, 60 after taxes, whatever, depending on which country you're in. A little
Yeah.
different, Canada and US, but you know where I'm going here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, know what you want to do, and I call it planned serendipity, right? Serendipity is an unexpected surprise, but if you have a good plan, a good system, you can 10x, but you can't 10x without it. You can't luck
Mm.
your way into that, right? So again,
Yeah.
I would just say, you know, especially with outside capital, you better be treating this like you're building, running, and scaling a company. If you just want to
Yeah.
be in business by yourself with a couple of people, great, but run that just as well. But there's a difference between responsibility to pay back others that if you're just trying to pay yourself.
So, what leadership habit quietly weakens culture even when business performance looks strong?
I think we've talked about it indirectly and implicitly, but let's get explicit. And that's an
Hmm.
owner who can't get out of their own way, where they make it more about them. And maybe for all the right reasons. Nobody knows what to do. I'm the only one that can get that done. You need me over here. Well, I get the theory. In reality, that doesn't scale and it's not healthy. It could last for a while. And I've seen some scrappy companies, rock and roll in 5, 6 years. But you know what happens a lot? It's that seventh year or it's the
Mm,
quarter. Tariffs come along, you didn't know it was going to happen. A COVID hit,
right,
you didn't
right.
know it was going to happen. That bank calls its note. Control the controllables. So yeah, I think leaders that don't basically, Sonia, thank you for your podcast, the show, don't embrace a lot of what we're talking about. Those are the ones that get them into trouble. And we could talk a lot about other realities of not invented here syndrome and ego and arrogance and the flip side. They're anxious, they're nervous, they're uncertain. Yeah, right. That's where I think everybody who's an entrepreneur or founder should have a coach, and you don't have to go out and hire a bunch of boss up type coaches. But back to AI. Now AI does some kooky things where it talks too nicely to you sometimes, and we all know, we've read the stories and seen it. It can get a little hallucinogenic. So
Yeah,
be careful that you've got people in your life who are telling you what you need to hear versus what you want to hear. But very often I see, and those that seek succeed big time do find that peace with, hey, I don't know what I don't know, and I need some help,
yeah,
and I need to follow proven frameworks, and I need to step up and step in. So I
yeah.
the biggest one is, they just get caught up in their own way. They realize that, or they don't realize what they don't have, and they don't know, and I would say, more often than not, what you don't know gets you more into trouble than what you do know.
And your answer goes great with my next question. So, as an investor and a board member, what signals that a founder is not coachable as they think they are?
Well, I resigned from 2 boards just last year. Back to my frustration a little bit with being, I'm part of a venture capital group, so I don't consider myself, to be doing it all on my own. But sadly, 2 companies I invested in and was on the board, the founder basically said no to this conversation. And I was like, hey, we didn't put this money in to just fund your lifestyle, to just
Mm,
get some sales. We want to build a company. Because typically, whether you're private equity, family office, venture capital, we're not a bank that says, "Hey, here's a 3-year note, pay us back prime plus X." This is more speculative, which means we want 4 to 7x returns, and ideally 3 to 5 years.
yeah,
And nobody wants to buy a company that's overly reliant on its founder. Right? We
yeah,
want the opposite, actually. You know that. I mean, even back to selling a company at enterprise value, you normalize the balance sheet and the P&L. So you say, hey, yeah, you may stay on for a while. So it's when founders again believe that they're worth more than they are. They don't have what I call humble confidence. And I usually can test that in my, I don't do the due diligence like, the big deals do, but I can, I've been around the block. My spidey senses and Jedi skills are pretty good, but sometimes, I slip up and I'm find myself in places that the founder doesn't want to play ball.
mm,
Um, and then I would say the other two are, the extremes of go too fast or go too slow. And I truly believe that, like most things, it's an end both and a it depends, but it's in the middle kind of a scenario. And yeah, I got
hmm,
to be kind of fond of the good use of business operating systems. So, you know, people who get their head around it. And ideally, what we're really trying to do with Boss Up in our world is take the best of what the big companies do, leave behind the bad, take the best of what startups and small scrappy companies do, leave behind the bad, right? And create
yeah.
this solution that takes the best of the best and tailors it to where you're at. So you've got this almost oversight, right? That ensures
Yeah.
that you're doing what you're supposed to do, even if you don't have a board and outside investors.
I like what you're saying because I meet a lot of founders who just think that, you know, they're like the company can't run without them. They it's completely reliant on them. And when I talk to investors, their number one thing to me is we will not invest in companies that the founder is the face of the company. It takes the founder to bring in sales because they are sort of like the brand per se. But another thing that like I've discovered myself just in my own journey, like with AI, like I recently, like I'm not in the office every day. I have other things that I'm doing that I'm passionate about, and I'm not running I run three companies, but I have other things that I'm doing. And with AI the other day I was like, you know what, I'm not in the office every day. I kind of just need to know like what's going on with this product, who's working on what. So I built like a little system using AI, and I can be anywhere in the world and I can log in and see where my roadmap is, where things are. But I actually built this little, it's a tiny little system, but I actually built it for me because I'm so overwhelmed with tasks, and I'm assigning other people tasks and they're not doing them because they forgot. And so I started out by creating like a task system for myself so I could assign things to other people and sort of track when they're done, etc. And then I sort of pivoted a little bit and built this other system. But I think that's like good leadership, realizing where when you are not doing everything perfectly, there's room for improvement, and you sort of seek ways of hey, how can I be better organized is a simple thing, right? And all of that just brings you some sense of calm as a founder, and you have like capability for so much more.
Yeah, well, to your point, not only do I agree with you and applaud you, but you just said something that's counterintuitive. The better systems you have supporting you, the more freedom it gives you, the more confidence it gives you, the more peace of mind it gives you. And that's counterintuitive to a lot of people. People hear the word systems and they think bureaucracy and you know, um,
They're tracking me.
yeah, right. And yeah, sure, that does happen, but it just a lot of things a lot of people just don't necessarily see, not because they're dumb or stupid or ignorant. They just haven't been necessarily brought to that place yet. So
Yeah.
100%. And again, it's one of my passions in life. A lot of people call me the systems guy or whatever. I could be called a lot worse than that. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think systems should be humane, and I think they help you with resiliency. I think they bring stability, and by the time I get done doing my talks and what have you, a lot of people are like, huh. And not because I'm providing some wisdom that's an epiphany. My dad likes to say common sense is not so common. There's just some things that people just don't pause and reflect and think about. When you do, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I just want to bring up a point, and you can speak to it, and maybe I'm completely off base, but I find that like a lot of conversations that I have with founders, and usually I bring on founders who have built, sold successful companies, and a lot of times it's like fluff, and my podcast is about no fluff. And it's like, I don't want to hear wake up early in the morning and be positive and manifest and go do it, go do it. So, if you have like one piece of advice for a founder and, one thing that they can do every day to help them be successful, what would you say?
Well, first things first, and again, not only do I agree, but my latest keynote, if you go to leadwithscott.com, you can actually download the PDF, and it's all about
Hmm.
the essence of what you just said. Motivation
Okay.
fades. Motivation fades. Fluff is fluff, right? And I think in the world today, we do have a dynamic today, right? And in my latest book, Moments, this was inspired by my work. I got a moment in here on safe. I've been in rooms. I don't feel safe. But what doesn't feel safe? I get the concept, but can you explain? Because if
Yeah.
you can't tell me what it is, because I don't see a saber-toothed tiger. I'm not screaming. I don't see, lava coming down from the walls. Well, I don't want to share it with you. Well, you're on a leadership team. If we don't share, how do we learn? And how do we ultimately
Yeah.
share? Because we don't know what the issue is, right? And boundaries and some of these things that have been over the last, let's be honest, 5, 7 years on our planet, it's been a struggle. It's been like this
Yeah.
tension, this conflict. And so first things first, I think we have to really embrace the fact that if you are in it to win it, there's nothing wrong with impact and income. There's nothing wrong
Mm.
with purpose, but you got to have profit. There's nothing wrong with passion, but you don't achieve passion without process. You don't fly into success and fall into failure, right? You got to own the moment. And that's
Yeah.
why I'm so passionate about, moments and moments to momentum. And if you do all that, by the time you're done with the game, hopefully you say, hey, what a ride. It was momentous, right? It's kind of the fun we have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say the appreciation of responsibility and accountability, even if it is a company that's all about you, you're a retailer in the cloud, or you're doing whatever. If you really are genuinely in love with your product or service and you do it because you have something other people want, then put them at the forefront too.
Mm.
You may not have
Yeah.
employees, you may not have family, you may not have that traditional setup, but you got to have that again, that fusion of
Yeah.
and both purpose, profit, passion, process, system,
Yeah.
soul. So that would be my big push is if I knew then what I know now, well, I wouldn't be on with you because I probably own my own mountain up there in, some northern Canada. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say that would be, and back to being on the show today, and my passion for being on some podcasts and doing what we're doing these days is that, especially because of AI, especially because of what
Yeah.
socioeconomically, especially because of the dynamics on planet Earth. Now more
Yeah.
than ever, I call it humanitarian capitalism. We need an end both that respects the individual and the collective, that respects the desire and have the motivation, have the the inspiration, but that's got to be also complemented by reality,
Yeah.
right? In reality, we got to pay bills and
Yeah.
we got to clean up our messes and ideally we make it better than we found it. So that would be my passionate, realistic, not fluff, but motivation meets mechanics, if you follow me.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the mechanics along with the other things, I just really think you're setting yourself up for trouble.
One of the reasons why I wanted to have you as a guest is because you were so focused on processes and systems. And I sometimes call myself a robot. I was talking to my friend the other day and I was like, I just went away to do a thing in the US and it completely like flustered me. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, my routine. I'm such a routine person. Like even during COVID, I got up every day and I went to the office because I need that. It keeps me like going. It keep like I love processes. I'm such a process girl. So when I have a moment and I'm out of my process, I'm like, okay, like even like my health is a process for me. I need to do this. I need to check this. I also had a health scare a couple years ago, but like I take care of it by having a process. I have like a little book where I write things down and I check things. So I think it's also finding like some sort of, even if you don't have a full system, finding a little thing that works for you and start with that and build your way up into like full systems.
You bet. I mean,
Yeah.
you're I see this too. I've been invited into a lot of, let's just call them alpha male type run companies that are making gobs of money and they have private planes and whatever, right? And
Yeah.
I've heard more than I care to tell you how many times I've looked at them and go, ooh, you're not a pillar of health and well being. And I don't want to get superficial. I'm just trying to say, you
Yeah.
you can't be here for other people if you don't take care of yourself. And I hear this, I can't take care of myself because I'm so busy taking care of the other people. To which I say, and I am a coach, so coaches don't always tell you what you want to hear. In fact, when I start my executive coaching session, I typically have a little fun and say, so what's it going to be today? A hug, a kick in the shorts, or a little bit of both? Typically needs to be a little bit of both. But where they get it wrong is, it's not about if you get hit by a bus and you're no longer on earth. In fact, that's the easiest way out. It's what if you have a health crisis? If you get a stroke, you get sick, and all of a sudden you become a triple liability to yourself, to your family, and to the company. And that's not cool.
Yeah.
That's
No.
not cool, right? So I see a lot of people who don't realize that actually taking care of yourself and specifically your health is actually selfless, not selfish. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
You put on your seatbelt, right? You
Yeah.
put on your mask first, all those things that sound counterintuitive, but much smarter people than me have realized that to take care of others, you first need to take care of yourself spiritually, mentally, physically, relationally, emotionally. And that's not easy. So no
Yeah.
doubt about it. But I go back to the good systems. I believe this. And in fact, in my book, Moments to Momentum, I talk about the 90, the 80-10, sorry, 10-80-90 rule. And that basically says if you're running a really good systems company, and again, the right version, not the wrong version, you should be able to spend about 40% of your life in the first 10%, the business development, the marketing, the innovation, the visionary stuff, the, rubbing elbows, kissing babies, right? And you ready? Taking care of yourself. And then
Yeah.
the last 40% is in the last 10%, which is the thank yous. May we have another? What more should we do? And you ready? Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Taking care of yourself should almost be treated like a utility. You pay your light bills, you pay your water bills, right? You don't want your
Yeah.
plumbing to back up. Think about yourself as, again, a machine. Yes, you have hearts, you have a lot of, skin and sensitivities. But yeah, I see that all too often.
Mm.
I think we're getting better than where we were before. But yeah, this romantic glorification of the grind, the scrappy, and the next thing you know, right, you start hitting these walls, both perceived and real. And it's funny, when I first started, I lived overseas most of my life. I didn't get my driver's license, believe it or not, till I was literally 21. And I remember driving from Chicago. I went to the University of Minnesota, and I'm speeding, and my dad, just classic, my dad. So we get there 10 minutes faster, right? Just think about all the things that could go wrong.
Mm.
You're going, 85 and a 65.
Yeah.
My
It's
mom
true.
are too, because I'm going to college, and he's like, and don't forget about us. It's not just you that's going to be screwed up. But, you have
Yeah.
your hands, and I never driven before, right? So it's just one of those little life lessons that wasn't just about driving a car. You follow me? So yeah,
Yeah.
the health, and we talk a lot about healthy accountability and
Yeah.
seeking clarity over comfort. So again, a lot of these concepts aren't easy, and they're not easy to
Hmm.
do, but I hope ideally people also realize that there's fun in learning new things and being challenged. I don't want to go all David Goggins or Jocko Willink here, but discipline does equal freedom, and do the
Yeah.
hard thing, right? And
I agree.
your head around that, you'd be amazed how much easier the hard stuff does get, because you're just chomping away at hard things and doing things you don't necessarily like, but you're still doing them.
Love it. Well, Scott, our time has come, but
Oh,
this
Sonia, I
was
thought this was a 4-hour podcast. My
uh,
agent said, okay, fine. No, thank you
um,
very much. I encourage and applaud your show, what you're doing, why you're doing it. And appreciate you putting up with me and having me on today.
oh no, of course. I when I read your bio, I thought you could bring a lot of value from both sides, running companies, investing in companies. And if even one person takes something away or gets an action item from this episode, that's sort of the goal. So I appreciate your time.
And you're out,
Thank you so
I should have asked you this before we got on mic here. You're in Toronto, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, Toronto is one of my favorite cities. I've been there dozens of times.
It's a great city.
Yeah, it's actually not that hard of a drive. It's only about 6 hours, 6.5 hour drive from Carmel, Indiana to Toronto, believe it or not. I've done it
It's not
many
bad,
times.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time today.
Merci
And thank you.
beaucoup.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see, I had to get that in there just a little bit there. No, thank you. Appreciate you
Thank
and
you.
the show. And thanks everybody out there in the listening world.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining me on this journey of learning and growth. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building through a challenge right now. You can also connect with us on social media and be part of a community that believes resilience is the real advantage. Remember, growth isn't linear, success isn't guaranteed, and setbacks are part of the process. What matters is how you execute. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.